Welcome back. Now on Thursdays we normally have our CEO report, and Mr. Hudson has been welcoming other department heads to come in and give us their updates to their particular parts of Laguna Woods Village. And today, Mr. Ernesto Munoz, who's our Director of Maintenance, is joining us. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Connie. Brad is a hard act to follow, but we're going to do our best.
Well, you do have some very important things to talk about today. I know that you and I got together and talked a little bit about the issues that are facing the village, and dry rot is really at the top of the list.
It is. In maintenance operation, our charge is to execute a lot of the maintenance and capital programs for the mutuals as well as GRF. This year we are executing approximately $30 million worth of work.
Wow.
It's a huge investment, but then again, the infrastructure investment in the community that all of our members own, it's probably in the billions. So as with any asset, it's important that you stay on top of it and that you do everything you can to make sure that that asset has longevity, and it's essentially your investment, so you want to do that. Deferred maintenance on any assets, particularly infrastructure, it's not something you want to do.
No.
It comes back and bite.
Yes.
So you want to make sure you stay on top of that, and the boards are doing just that. They're putting money where it's needed, so we can do that, and that's partly what we're doing. So there's a lot going on in our maintenance and operations division, from paving to paint programs to prior to paint, heater replacement in our manners, just a huge number of projects that are ongoing, including the capital for GRF.
Yes.
We're working on the Performance Arts Center right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're doing, well, we're not actually doing the physical work on the facility, but we're going through the program and doing all of the evaluations that are needed. We're going through the outreach process. We're getting ready to move into design development as soon as we complete that. So that's a very big project that's going on. We're also going through the process of submitting preliminary plans to the city for our pickleball courts, and that's going to be a beautiful amenity for the community as well. So we're also handling that. So there's quite a bit going on, but today we wanted to focus on dry rot.
Yes.
So dry rot, really not a very sexy project.
Well, we have a picture of it behind us right here. Those are some examples of what's happening.
Absolutely. There is, while it's not as sexy as building a clubhouse or a pickleball court or a boardroom, it's nonetheless one of the most important maintenance programs for the community. The community is made up primarily of wood frame structures.
And that's actually a real positive thing, that they're one-story wood frame structures. So that means any maintenance or any renovation done to the structure, it's less expensive because we're not dealing with two-story structures, we're not dealing with steel framing, so this is not a bad thing.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it is one story, but we also have to focus on the 3 stories and
well,
the
that's
2
true.
stories.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Particularly in third.
Yes.
We just initiated a program, and the board allocated funding to do that. Approximately about $1.5 million to go and replace beams in these structures. These are wooden beams that are exposed to the elements.
Yes.
Unfortunately, many of the design elements in the structures were put together in a way that they did not really conceal some of the wood elements. Wood, when exposed to the elements, when exposed to moisture, experiences rot.
Yes.
It's just
breaks down.
Yeah, it's a fungi that thrives in moisture, and it thrives in wood. And a lot of the elements in our structures are exposed. And that's part of the beauty of some of these structures.
Yes.
You know, we have some of the breezeways, which is a beautiful design element, architectural design element. However, the beams, and many of them are glue lamp beams. And glue lamp beams is essentially a layer of plywood glued together. are exposed to the weather, and they don't fare very well in the weather.
And what we're looking at right here, these are the eaves, and we have, I see there's a gutter sitting on top of this one to the right, but that's a typical example of an exposed end of a beam, and this one may not even be structural. This is probably aesthetic.
That is correct.
True.
And that is just aesthetic. It really doesn't need to protrude beyond the eave.
Right.
So we're approaching the dry rot challenges in the community very aggressively, and we're doing that in many ways. One of the ways we're doing that is through our Prior to Paint program.
Tell me about Prior to Paint, because that sounds very interesting.
Sure. Just like you would in your home before you do a paint job, the most important part, and this is the painters who tell us this, is the prep. The preparation,
yes.
You know, taping everything, make sure it's spackle all the holes, everything is smooth. So the paint is the last touch. So,
and that's if it's in good condition.
If it's in good condition.
If the existing conditions are good existing conditions.
That's correct.
But if there's any dry rot, if there's any degradation to the materials,
yeah, that's where prior to paint is really important.
Yes.
So, we have a prior to paint program that addresses both mutuals. And United is particularly important because they don't have a specific dry rot program per se, like Third does.
Yes.
So the board this year added additional funding to the dry rot program to be a little bit more aggressive going after the dry rot issues that we're finding as we move with the paint program. This is a typical example of some of the things that we find out there. On the left side, you can see a beam. This is actually a program that is currently underway in Third.
Yes.
To replace exposed beams and breezeways. And these are very large beams. They're about 16 inches deep and
they do carry some weight.
They carry some weight. As you can see that they've been undermined by the dry rot. So it's something that you don't want to ignore.
No.
You have to really stay on top of it, replace those beams, and then add architectural features to them, such as caps and things that will prevent this from occurring in the future.
That's right.
So we're changing, as I said, this is a multi-pronged approach. Part of it is done through the dry rot program, where our crews go out there, prepping the buildings. They discover things that need to be done.
And the discovery of things to be done, that
That's right.
takes some time.
It does take some time. The program that we're doing right now for the beams replacements requires, it's a multidisciplinary approach actually. You have to go out there and do what we call destructive testing, which is poking holes in the facility.
And we've all done destructive testing. We've all seen something going on in our home and said, oh my goodness, I gotta poke a hole in the ceiling or in the wall to check and see what's really happening.
That's the only way that you can find out. Fortunately, with new technology, now we're able to do smaller holes.
Yes.
And be able to use cameras to be
That's
able
wonderful.
to give us a better picture of what's in there. But once you do that and you discover what the issues are related to dry rot, you have to engage the services of a structural engineer.
Yes.
Because a lot of these members are structural and they need to be replaced, and you can't just replace them in kind. You have to see what the loads are and the wind loads and the codes, the current codes, bring everything to current code to be able to replace these members.
And our current codes actually include a lot of earthquake stress code, things that will protect us, and that weren't in place at the time that the community was built.
Absolutely.
So we've learned more about our Southern California earthquake possibilities and that the ground actually liquefies. So the codes have come up to a speed where we are more safe with current building codes.
That is correct. That is correct. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of liquefaction issues in the community. There's some isolated areas.
Yes.
But nonetheless, these buildings are made out of wood.
Yes.
And they use plywood to support them laterally.
Yes.
And that plywood, you want to make sure that that plywood is viable throughout the life of the structure so that they can fare well during an earthquake. Because they're all wood and they're essentially done as boxes, they have very good lateral resistance.
They do.
So, but you have to make sure that all their structural members are viable. So we don't want to have something that is halfway rotted, that it will not be able to carry those loads. So that's a very important program to go through, make sure we replace those things. Now, as you showed in another picture, some of the architectural features such as corbels, things that stick out of the structure, and they're pretty, and there was a time when they were architectural.
Viable, yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't. Again, they're exposed elements to the weather, and they cause a maintenance liability for the mutuals.
Yes.
So as we move through the paint program, we're removing some of those. We're ending up with a structure that's with a building that is actually a little bit more contemporary,
streamlined,
a streamlined look. But at the same time, we're eliminating that that maintenance liability for the mutual in the future.
And so we might have to say goodbye to some of these aesthetic elements because they've done their job. They were beautiful for 50 years, and it might be time to remove some of those because that degradation, that dry rot that's happening there could come in and spread to the rest of the building, conceivably, because the moisture works its way in.
That's right. So part of the program, not only to replace the elements that we find, is to actually look at the architectural details that were used at the time.
Yes.
Things have changed considerably. Some of these buildings are approaching 50 years old.
Yes.
And while they're beautiful and we want to retain them, we want to make sure that we incorporate, as we do things to them, that we incorporate details, architectural details that are with the latest technology and preclude moisture intrusion. There's some of our buildings that have some beautiful parapets that stick out of the roofs.
Yes, and a parapet is like a very short vertical wall that just sticks up on top of the roof, and it's pretty. It makes a nice line.
Yeah, it's an architectural feature. It breaks the two roofs into different elements.
Right.
Unfortunately, anything that sticks out of your roof, it's a potential place for water to migrate.
Yes. A rain catch.
Yeah, so that's another thing we're looking at. We're looking at to maybe possibly eliminate some of these parapets and make the roofs just nice and straight. Again, more contemporary look. But we'll eliminate the liability, the maintenance liability in the future, and we'll make sure that these buildings are viable, another 50 years in the future.
And this multidisciplinary approach, it takes a structural engineer, it takes an aesthetic, architectural design approach. Then there's a maintenance approach regarding dry rot and even mold. So there are some other approaches that are part of this multidisciplinary
That's
action.
right, you're absolutely correct. It includes when our buildings were constructed back, close to 50 years, asbestos was a material that was used.
Yes, it was.
Throughout, and so we have asbestos throughout the community. Now, asbestos by itself is not, it's not really a problem unless you start banging it out, constructing, cutting it.
If it's encapsulated.
So if it's encapsulated,
then it's safe.
It's safe.
And it can stay where it is.
That is correct.
But if it ever friates, if it ever breaks apart, it gets into the air as particles.
That is right.
That is when
that
the
is
danger could happen.
That's right. That's why our hygienist has to actually come in as well.
A hygienist in this team.
Yeah. So that's right. So when we do the cuts to see what's inside the walls,
yes,
and to determine the extent of the dry rot, we have to bring a hygienist to determine whether there's asbestos, how much, how to abate it, how to encapsulate it, how to remove it, all of that. So there's many disciplines that are involved through this. And that's only before we even get to construct.
Yes.
That's all of the design and the evaluation and all of that to put a program together to just go out to bid for construction. So third, at the next M&C will be considered an award of a contract to a consultant to go through that, where we have selected 20 buildings in third that are representative of about 760 models. And that will give us a good idea what the extent is throughout the third community.
Yes.
And will also, part of the this contract will allow us to complete the specifications for 20 of these structures. So when this is all said and done, we will not only have a program that we can rely on in the future, we will also have 20 structures that we can go out and bid for construction immediately. Because
the structures are indicative of the types of models that exist here.
Exactly.
So you'll have the 20 structures, and we have their identical models throughout the community.
That's correct.
So as you bring in the contractors to give you their bids, they can look exactly at that model and know exactly what needs to be handled, because it's very important.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, part of the challenge with this programs in dealing with dry rot, it's the certainty. You need to have some certainty as what you're going to find, because as we found in the past, when we started these projects without some real prior investigation, once you open that wall, you don't know what you're going to find.
Everybody has experienced that, I think.
That's right.
Once you break open the wall and you take a look inside, you might get
right.
some surprises.
That's right. So we want to reduce that uncertainty for the mutual so that we can tell them with some level of certainty as to where the cost is going to be to address this. So that's what this program will be doing for us partly.
It's wonderful to define the scope of work that way, because that really helps you keep the costs down and understand everything about the process and the cost of the process.
That is correct.
So these mutuals now have awarded these contracts, and the work is being evaluated for a chance to begin.
That is correct. So we're looking forward to continuing to be very aggressive towards this challenge in the community. I think we're doing the right thing. I think that the mutuals and their boards have appropriated sufficient dollars to be able to address this program moving forward. We've also changed a lot of our maintenance practices. You know, in the past we did a lot of patching of the dry rotted areas, and then we painted over that
to keep the costs down.
Yeah,
you
to
just
keep
case by case basis.
Exactly, to keep the costs down. Our approach now is to actually, when we find it, we actually remove it. We'll replace the element, and you'll find that over the long term, which is our approach, the long-term vision, the cost will be significantly lower for the mutuals to do that, invest the money now, rather than just patch and move on, kick the can down the road.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But it does sound like a wonderful and conscientious approach. And it's a great thing that it's starting now, and you're getting out there and finding out exactly how much work to be done.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for being with us today,
Well, you're
Mr.
very
Munoz.
welcome. My pleasure.
We know that we can rely on you and your team to make sure that the community is beautiful and safe.
Absolutely.
Well, come see us again soon.
We will.
Okay.
Thank you.
You stay with us as well, because we are going to welcome the Tea Party Sentinels. Mr. Richard Palmer is going to tell us about an event coming up, and you will be hearing from him right after this.